In this video, I'm going to talk about expanding your spirit realm view. My experience of helping many people grow, unless we've come out of already a supernatural lifestyle, maybe an occult lifestyle or something else that's made us open to the supernatural realm, is that we have a very limited worldview of the spirit realm. If something breaks in spiritually or supernaturally, it's really unusual. It's like that's special. That happens very rarely. When in fact, when you look at the life of Jesus, the spirit realm is constantly interacting with Christ and with the people around him. There's a thin veil between the seen and the unseen. It's like Christ is living in two worlds at the same time. Most people around him are only aware of the one world, but they see the fruit of the other world that he interacts with. And of course, he seems strange sometimes. He seems not culturally normal because he's aware of this other realm, but not only aware, he's living from it. In fact, one of his key statements is, "I only do what I see the Father doing." Well, where's your Father and how is he showing you what you're doing? But it seems like Jesus knows constantly what Father is doing, what is going on in the invisible spirit realm, the realm where God operates that breaks in on the physical realm. He's aware of it. He's living from it. How can we increase that? If we're going to be involved more in that, if we're going to experience that more in our lives, and if that is your hunger, and that's why perhaps you're listening to this video or why you seek out this sort of teaching, you want to be engaged in a realm that you know is real, but seems afar off. It seems distant. It seems so mystical you can't touch it. Because we've grown up in a materialistic environment, we're taught that what is physical, visible, audible is the most important, and anything else is not as important. There's only one reality, and it's material. Anything else? No, it's not real. So even the things we can't see, like oxygen or electromagnetic waves, they are real and invisible, but they're part of, to us, the material realm. That's what we're taught. Everything has a material explanation. Now, if you have that mindset, it's going to blind you to the other realm that dramatically influences our life, that was flowing through Jesus and the disciples, and is what we hunger for, this spiritual depth, because that too is real. It's a part of the bigger picture of reality, and it's close. It's not afar off. So we're going to have to open our eyes to a non-material reality that literally governs, impinges, moves on this visible realm and changes things. And vice versa, what we do in this material realm can influence the immaterial realm. Many of us start with an overly simplistic worldview of the spirit realm. We think that heaven is impossibly separated from us. It's such another place. If it was anywhere materially, then it would be in another galaxy far away. Whatever we have in our heads, this is what our hearts will be telling us from what we've learned and what we've submitted to and learned to live within. We don't think much of other cultures with a worldview of the supernatural and of the demonic. We think they're primitive. So the Enlightenment has taught us that we're clever. That in the West, we're really clever. We know this stuff. We know material stuff. And we can explain just about everything. And if you're used to being able to explain everything and you go into this other realm and become conscious of it, we're going to start with a very simplistic view. For instance, we see demons all over the Gospels. Like Jesus sets people free from the demonic. We usually do not have much of a worldview of where they've come from. And this video isn't to massively explore that. It's just that we just simply say, oh, they're fallen angels. Yet that is not explained in Scripture. That doesn't seem to be the case, even on a slightly deeper reading of Scripture, because these are different beings that crave a body, that when they're out of a body are thirsty and desperate to live in a body. So where have they come from? If we're going to engage in this realm, we're going to have to expand our understanding of where these things have come from and what they are and what is going on around us. Another example would be speaking to the dead. We would think that speaking to the dead is something that's completely wrong. And yet it seems like Jesus did that. On the mountain, he's talking to Elijah and Moses. Now, some people would then try and explain this and say Elijah didn't die, he was taken up into heaven, so he's just come back. But Moses is not so clear. That in Jude, it says the archangel and Satan fought over his body, so it sounds like he's dead to me. So how is he there talking to Jesus? And what is Jesus doing talking to him? And then in Hebrews, it talks about there being a great cloud of witnesses, all those that have gone before, the heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11. It says in chapter 12, they are the great cloud of witnesses watching over us, with us in a sense, because they don't get what they were promised until they get it with us. So somehow they're interacting. So we have a simplistic view of talking to the dead and where the dead are. It says in the Old Testament, do not talk to the dead. And anyone who does that should be cast out. Well, you have to understand the context. The Hebrews have just come out of the Egyptian culture. They've been rescued from it. And the Egyptian culture is obsessed with the dead and what's happening in the afterlife and how to interact with the dead and how to get the dead to interact back. A central scripture for them would be the Book of the Dead. In fact, the pyramids, that's almost certainly the Hebrew people were enslaved to build, was a means of enabling people who die, the pharaohs who die, to continue to live well in the afterlife. So their culture is obsessed with accessing that life and drawing on the power of those that have gone before. And so that's the context, which also then explains a little bit why Saul is contacting Samuel when he calls on the witch of Endor to raise up Samuel so that he can get his blessing. We see that Samuel did come and speak to Saul. And of course, we see that he's upset that Saul is seeking him for power and wisdom and answers now over God. I think that's the point of the story. So this video isn't long enough to go deeper into a worldview of where the dead are and the afterlife. But what I'm saying is, we can't have a simplistic view. You're going to experience things that will not fit. You'll see things in Scripture that do not fit, and we have to expand our worldview. Again, we do not understand speaking to animals. We have stories of people like Francis of Assisi, who a big part of his ministry was communicating with creation, was communicating with animals. And because of our simplistic worldview, we write all that off as myths and miss the point. We don't understand how alive things are. The thought that the stones might cry out and say, the Son of God has come, if we don't, when he's coming into Jerusalem. That doesn't fit in our simple worldview. And wrapped up in that is fear. Because if it's not simple, if it's not easy to say, well, everything supernatural is demonic and everything sort of ordinary is God, if it can't be that simple, then there's going to be hard to explain, not clear interactions, things happening that we can't control, can't understand, and can't put in a simple box. And that can make you afraid, because if something is unknown to you and something is uncontrolled, and we want control, and we want to use knowledge to control everything, we can feel afraid. Well, you're probably going to be shaken fairly soon as you seek more of God and his world and the unseen realm and the things above. It's going to be a little bit scary, But that's kind of a good thing. And to write everything off as occult is safe in a way, but not in a way that helps you grow. For instance, I'm sure if Moses came to your gathering and he threw down his stick and he turned it into a snake and said, "There, the proof that God is with you," I think most people would say, "Ah, no," and run out of the building. Now, this is not God, this is occult. And yet that was God. It was interesting that the occult people could do the same thing. But Moses had more power in his staff because it was from God, and his God overcame their gods. So again, that answers the statement, well, if the occult people do it, we shouldn't be doing it. Well, Moses did, and to a much greater degree, and he was in submission to Yahweh in doing it. He also put his hand inside his jacket and pulled it out. It was covered in leprosy. Imagine doing that in a gathering, saying, "Jesus is with us, look at my hand," and then putting it back in and it being healed. And we go, "Wow, that's freaky," because it's outside of the simplistic worldview that we want to live in because we want to be in control and know and be safe. Now, we may not go around constantly thinking that, but that's what's in our hearts. And you can tell that when people say, "Oh, I'm scared to turn the lights out, and I'm scared to stand in the dark because it feels like something's there." Well, I've got news for you. Something is there. You are surrounded by the spirit realm, by God, the seven spirits. The cherubim and seraphim are watching. There's probably angels going in and out of your sphere of influence constantly. There's noises, voices, thunders happening. It's just we're not connected to those things, and we've not learned to live within that world. We've reduced our world to a simplistic view of the supernatural realm. And God, in these times and in your life, if you're hungry, is willing and wanting and needing to expand you. Aslan is a lion, the great lion. "Ooh," said Susan, "I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion." "Safe?" said Mr. Beaver. "Who said anything about safe? Course he isn't safe. But he is good. He's the king, I tell you." And that's the fresh worldview that we need. God isn't a cozy, fluffy marshmallow God. Sure, he knows how to hug you, comfort you, help you in your sorrows, be so close to you like no one else can. He's compassionate, he's deeply compassionate, but he's also glorious and great and mysterious and, yes, frightening, like fear of the Lord, not because he will do something horrible, but because we can't control him. He's wonderfully unpredictable. He's full of goodness and glory in a way that causes our hearts to gape with mouths wide open, going, "Wow, I tremble in your presence." So he's love, and in his presence is trembling. And we need our worldview expanded. So I'm asking, as you listen to this video right now, you'd be aware more of his presence and of the house of God's presence and of the realm of the spiritual beings being more present and conscious to you. That the veil that is there in our minds that stops us seeing through fear, through a simplistic worldview, through just slumber, would start to be lifted, and that you would realize the great God is here and his world is here, and the reality is not merely material. Far from it. The material realm is a small part of true reality. So I ask your eyes would open, your heart would open, and you'd enter that slight fear that he's here, he's good, but I don't know exactly what he will do and what I will see. And that's okay, because I'm not in control of everything that happens in life. He's given me peace. He's given me authority. I can walk through it all.